All right, we've already completed a few lessons, but I wanted to go over our goals for these next lessons. The NCCR books are what our curriculum is based on. As we find ourselves in the COVID-19 era, we're adapting to the methods that are new to us. Normally, following the modules in the book, we go through each topic or subject area separately, taking each module one by one. You do basic safety first, then construction math, hand tools, then power tools, then you do a module on basic blueprint reading and interpretation. But this is how we go through the book. Take one subject, one topic, cover it, then go to the next. But in this format we're doing now, we'll continue to try to cover the same material that our curriculum covers, only we'll do it as we go. We'll take our projects and use them as a platform to cover these learning objectives as it relates to what we're working on at the time. In the lessons we have done so far, we've already covered a few objectives, and we'll cover many more as we continue. For instance, the basic safety module, which is the first in the core book. And in this video lesson that we have today, we'll cover some safety objectives. And there'll be a lot of basic safety objectives covered in the next few videos. How about the introduction to construction math? We try to get as much math in as possible. And from the very first video, you know, we've done some. We're just looking at examples, what we've already covered with our lessons. All right, we talked about hand tools, we talked about power tools. Today's lesson addresses some of the material handling issues. We talk about setting up for materials and for efficiency. Shown here in reading plans and elevations, here are some of the performance objectives required in our curriculum, Carpentry 1. And in our first planning videos, we covered several objectives concerning plans and drawings. So in just that first couple videos, we covered a pretty good bit of the performance objectives required by the curriculum. We covered selected symbols. You become familiar with some symbols. I mean, there are more that we will get into later. We didn't refer to site and plot plans, but we did become familiar with floor plan drawings. We became familiar with elevation drawings and touched a little bit on detail drawings. So just in those little construction drawings we had with the first couple videos, we covered probably, I'm going to say 50% of the performance objectives required in our plan module. As we continue in these lessons, we'll talk about safety, math, power tools, power equipment. We'll talk about plans, planning, and we'll talk about other things, whatever else we can get into. Maybe we'll get to cut some rafters. Maybe we'll be able to lay out and cut some steps. Whatever we get into, we're just trying to make this as hands-on as it can possibly be, you know, where you can relate to it and get engaged a little bit in this long-distance learning process. At the conclusion of this lesson, you will be able to Identify workplace hazards and risks. Define PPE. Explain the significance of eye protection. Recognize hazardous conditions that are related to work area floors. Identify things to consider before starting construction. Describe the significance of dry lubricant with equipment work surfaces. Things to improve efficiency when setting up material and equipment. And you'll be able to describe the significance and how pressure treated lumber is stored, should be stored. And evaluate options in sorting lumber. Sometimes you forget the significance of the most important job that you have. Safety is an attitude. But it also requires some education. But just because you're trying doesn't always mean it's working. Here are a few examples.
Shut up and sit down.
Kolega Rafał nabiera i ładny wyrzut, piękny i hop do Mareczka. No.
Się przy nas chowią.
I następnie, i znowu.
Najnowocześniejsza wciągarka.
Hop i już jesteśmy. No proszę Państwa.
Oh, here comes a big stick. Here comes a big stick.
They're going to drown it with acid. We're going to try the big stick theory. He's going to go flying across try to kill the engine with water, and Hit the big stick.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, now we're going to smother it with a tarp. We've now angered the machine. The machine is now angry.
You dumbasses.
This is hilarious. Okay, we're going to smother it with tarp.
It's actually gonna work, I think.
Oh, there we go. No.
Oh, in the
Oh,
hole.
oh, right him in the hole.
Oh, right him, cowboy.
We've now got him in the hole, spin. Oh, ole. 8 seconds. 8 seconds is what we're looking for. He is now blinded and mad.
I can't get you. Oh, this. This is this has got to be YouTube, man.
The film is rolling, Howard.
All right.
Thanks for watching my video.
So we just saw some examples that show why people need to be able to recognize hazards and risks. Hazards and risks that are associated with the area you are working in and the work that you are doing. And with each tool that you use, and determine what you can do to make it safer. What is a hazard? A hazard is anything that can cause harm to you or someone else. But you see the hazards. You got a hole in the floor, poor beaver. So what I want you to do is take a second to write down 3 hazards related to work. And just keep it simple, like water on the floor, using a side grinder, overhead work, just general things that could cause harm. And pause the video for a second, write some things down. Now, what is a risk? What is a risk? A risk is a probability of what may happen with the way you deal with a situation or with a hazard. So risk equals you plus the hazard. As we look at these next pictures, think about what makes a situation risky and what you could do to reduce the risk. Grinding steel is a hazard because it causes a lot of sparks. So how do you deal with that situation determines the risk. Look at this guy. No face shield. I don't even know what's going on here. All right, here. Wow. So here is the hazard. Now, what are the risks? High risk, low risk, what do you think? With the hazards you wrote on the last slide, list a few risks that might be related to those hazards. For example, the water on the floor, the risk might be slip and fall or electric shock. So just take a little bit of time, and when you get done, go ahead and pause it for a second. When you get done, we'll continue. All right, let's look at hazards and risk. Here you standing on the beach and you think about going out this island. Think about swimming out to it. Then you realize there's a hazard. So you consider the risk that might be involved with that hazard. You consider it, and you realize that's a high risk. Not going with that option. So then you think of options. Yeah, this is a little better. I still ain't feeling real good about it. So you mark that one off. Think of another option. You consider this option and you think, okay, that's low risk. I'll go with that one. So what we're doing is taking hazards and learning how to take steps to reduce them. You want to reduce those risks. Bottom line, if you get that uh-oh feeling before you start to do something, think about it. Stop what you're doing. Think about it. Because when it comes to safety, if you're not sure about it, don't do it. Become familiar with ways to reduce those risks. We want to learn how to recognize hazards. Then you want to think about, with those hazards, what could happen. Consider the risk. So you make changes to reduce or eliminate those risks. See here, you got a miter gauge and using it to support the board. One way to reduce risk is with PPE. What is PPE? Personal protective equipment. PPE is the personal equipment that you should have to protect yourself from certain hazards while you're working. Personal protective equipment. See the different things we got here. You don't use them all the time. You will use your safety glasses a lot. Most of the time when you're working, you'll have safety glasses on. Some things you won't use much, they're for a specific reason. But you need to know when and how to properly use them. There are many hazards that can cause harm to your eyes. Eye protection can greatly reduce the risk of you getting injured. But don't take chances. Wear your eye protection. And always use eye protection when you're using power equipment. And we got one more topic to mention for us to complete our safety objectives. A cluttered area is a hazard. When I came in today, I had all intentions of coming here and cleaning up. Got messy, but I can't find my broom. Yes, this area looks like a hazard. If you were working in this area, what are some risks that you think might be possible? You could trip, on a board or snag your toe under one of these cords. You ever caught your foot on a cord or a hose while you're walking? You look like something grabbed you by the leg and you can't get away. Done that before. All right. If there were a nail or a screw left in a piece of wood, you might step on it too. Have you ever really stepped on a nail before? If you have, this is an experience you won't ever forget. And your foot could slip on a block or slip on sawdust. And you know, when you slip, that front foot hits whatever slips, and usually it shoots out from under, forward. I know several years ago I went down some steps, got to the bottom of the step, my right foot was still on the last step, and there was some water on the floor. And when my left foot hit the floor, I did a forward split. If I had known, I would have practiced, but my body was not ready for that move. This is something like what it looked like, only my back leg was up on the step. And I tore some quad muscles. My leg was black and blue for 2 weeks, all the way down to my ankles. But it wasn't so bad because, you know, after a few days I could get up, and it wasn't long I could start walking again. Anyway, falls are the leading cause of non-fatal medically treated injuries in the United States each year. Over 8 million emergency room visits are due to slips, trips, and falls. Something to keep in mind.
Whether you like it or not, when the shop starts getting cluttered up and floors dirty and things laying everywhere, you just gotta take time to clean up. Your tabletops get cluttered up, you know, you gotta pick them up, put stuff up. It's just easier to work when you keep things tidy. You know, before you start a new project, you know, take time to put things up, get out what you need, put up what you don't need, you know, clean up floor. I mean, a clean floor is a safe floor. And we all want to be safe because safety is the safest thing. Now we can always start with our floors. We got our old trusty broom out, clean up those corners, get it looking good, nice and safe. That's one way. And we got the old trusty shop vac for those surfaces off of the floor. We need to clean up. Yeah, tidy up everything. Oh yeah. Clean tabletop, floors. This tool gets the job done. And for those hard to clean areas, snap. It's a miracle worker. Might need you, doesn't ask.
All right, thinking ahead, we completed the safety objectives. We looked at hazards and risk, PPE, safety awareness as it relates to eye protection and cluttered work areas. Now we need to get things set up to help our work process be more efficient. Break it down into steps. Keep it simple. Set up, cutting your links, cutting your half laps, cut the rebar. You got to drill holes for the rebar. Then you got to put it together. Assembly. Just think about it a little while. Get it all worked out. In the construction business, the most important thing is the finished product. Whether it's a construction company or you as an individual, you build a reputation based on the quality of work you produce. And when a job is completed, it'll always represent the people that built it. My dad once told me, he said, if somebody pays you to dig a ditch, you dig the best ditch they've ever seen. So quality is job one. That said, time is money. So let's say you're building some raised garden beds to sell, and it costs you about $40 to build one. Now we got to start thinking about sales. And you going around, you got a few connections. You talk to some people at the landscape businesses, and the owners agreed that they'll give you $90 a piece, and they'll buy all you can make. And that gives you a profit for each one you build of $50. If you build one a day, you make $50 a day. And that might be okay for a little pocket change, a little money on the side. But what if you could set up a system to turn out 10? You got $500 profit every day. And with a quality product, you're going to pick up more sales. You went from a little side job to now you got a business. To be able to do more in less time, you have to learn to be more efficient. You can learn ways to be more productive by learning your tools. Which tool will be the most effective to do the job you want to do? Or how can I set up that tool or piece of equipment to help make things go smoother, things to be easier, faster? You want to eliminate unnecessary work. Think about what you're doing, be good at it. Place your material close to you. One of the best ways to be more efficient is to eliminate unnecessary steps and movements. We talked a little bit about how we can set up our equipment to make the work more efficient. Material supports and fence extensions, they're very useful when working with longer or heavy material. The supports help hold up the wood on the end, and the fence extensions just keep it in line. And they serve another purpose we'll talk about in a minute. Efficiency. The best way to save time is by eliminating unnecessary work. A huge waste of time and effort comes with something as simple as measuring. Pulling out your measuring tape, hooking the end of the board, and you gotta mark the length, and then you gotta put the measuring tape back up, and you gotta put your pencil back in your pocket. It doesn't sound like much, but if you got a lot of work to do, it all adds up. For instance, if you had 100 boards to cut to length, and each one has a lap cut on each end, that's 300 different cuts, 300 different measurements. If it took 30 seconds to measure each cut, that adds up to 150 minutes or 2 hours of measuring that you could eliminate. So when there are multiple pieces to be cut the same length, you need to just measure it once, and we'll figure out how to eliminate some unnecessary time. One way to eliminate wasted time is to place a mark on the fence extension as a gauge to slide the material to. Then you make a cut. Another way to make measuring and cutting faster and more accurate is to attach a stop block to the fence. You can clamp it, you can screw it, whatever way you want to do it. Is that right? You can save so much time and work just doing things like this. And when you save time, you save money. Here, our primary material is landscape timbers. They're very heavy, they're awkward to handle. Just think about how you could set up to make things faster and easier. What could you do? How could you arrange your materials? Well, here's an example of how I set up to cut the landscape timbers. To eliminate wasted steps and work, I moved the miter saw outside my shop so I wouldn't have to carry the material inside and cut it. And I placed them on a table close and in line with the saw. This made it easy to pull the material onto the saw and then slide it back to the table after I got through cutting.
Before we get started, I want to do a little prep work. Just take a few minutes to get things ready and make it easier for us in the long run. Alright, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this short piece of this fence. And since our boards are heavy and long, I'm going to add a longer fence, and it'll have dual purpose. I'll show you in just a little bit. When you're working with longer material, you need some type of support. You know, you see the miter saw, and it has these supports that are built in right here. So we got them adjusted up to where they help support the bottom of the lumber. Got those on both ends. But when you got a bigger piece of wood, especially something as heavy as these landscape timbers, you want some extra support. So, you know, when you slide it out, it kind of gets heavy on the end. So you can have some type of roller support like this. You adjust it down here to the height you need so that it supports the wood here, and it'll, you know, as you roll it back and forth, it just helps support it. And as you can see, that lumber on the other end is set up so we can slide it right over onto the saw. Now, if you don't have a roller support like this, I mean, you can use anything. You can use old saw bench or whatever. Just something to put up there to help hold the end of it up. So we got to cut a lot of pieces about 4 foot long and some 2 foot. But we're always talking about being efficient with your time. I have to measure, get my tape measure out, mark it 4 feet, put my tape measure up, put my pencil back up, got to line it up, get the saw right. And I can cut all the way through. But you always want to figure out a quicker way to do things. Work smarter, not harder. You can mark it right out here on the end. And use that mark to gauge your wood. You can also use a block and a clamp. Just slide the block right over to it. Clamp it. Now you just slide your wood over, bump your clamp, cut it. In this case, with some heavy material being used, I think I would prefer screw me a block up there. That way I ain't got to worry about slipping. So you just take your block, slide it up to it. That's it. You can do things to your tools to make everything a little easier for you. In the case of this, something heavy, it's a lot of friction. And it's a little hard to slide back and forth. So you can take some silicone lubricant, spray it on all your surface, on your wood fence, on your table. Spray it everywhere. Do a good job of coating everything. And just give it a few minutes to dry. Makes a world of difference. Alright, we'll give it a few minutes for our silicone to dry. And it makes a big difference. Oh. All lumber is banded and stays banded while it's at the supply house until it has to be open for sale. Once the bands are cut, the lumber will begin to warp, especially any pressure treated material such as landscape timbers. One thing about pressure treated lumber is it will warp quickly because it's saturated with liquid, and then when it starts drying out, it'll start twisting. So you need to use it pretty quick, or you can stack and clamp it. One good way to keep your lumber from warping is get it out of the sun as quick as possible and use it quick, or stack it and clamp it. If you stack it real good and then take some clamps to hold it down like these two on the ends, that'll help keep the boards from warping as they cure out and dry. And you might even want a cross piece like you see here. That'll help hold them from two different directions. With the material, you always want to check it out and see the best way to use it. You know, if you're doing a nice project you know, you want to see about maybe knots. Maybe you don't want to use those. I'd rather cut those out. You know, different defects in the wood, flaws. In this case, we got low grade lumber anyway, because we're building, you know, outdoor stuff. But one thing that you could consider will be how straight the boards are. You know, we're gonna need some 8-foot pieces, so that's a full length. So we would want to sight down all these boards, and you know, you can see that board right there is pretty straight. So we could use the straight boards, for the 8-foot, you know, the long cuts. But then you can look down this board, and you see that board is crooked. All right. So what would we do with it? Well, we could take that board, and if you look down it, you got a pretty good bow in it, right? From one end to the other. So it's going to have maybe a 1/2-inch crown in it. But if I got 4-foot pieces, I can cut it in the middle, and you can sight down it. You're not going to see much then. So we could always use your long boards. You want the straightest, and then things are going to be cut up. You can cut up with those boards that have warps and crooks in them.
That's it for today, guys. I think we did a good job covering the objectives this week. I've been wanting to redo this lesson for a while. Finally took the time to do it. And I made so many changes for those of you for those that already seen it. I want you to see it again because it's totally different. I appreciate y'all. I'm thinking about you, and we should be back soon. Next week, for the next couple of weeks, we'll be doing assembly videos, putting the raised garden beds together. But along with that, you know, we try to cover as much as we can with each lesson. We'll be covering a couple more tools. We'll talk about different methods of squaring up a project, what the term square means, the significance of it. We'll also cover calculating angles, like for polygons, octagon, you know, for different things that you might encounter in construction work. All fun stuff. So stay safe, and I'll see you next week.